Welcome to the Hive, and thank you for joining us today. We have a really cool show today, and a tough rider. He was a really good rider too. And who was this rider? Well, you guessed it. It was number 275, Big Jim, the animal. And he was an animal, Fishback. Jim was a throwback rider of the old days with the rough and tumble riders, where the riders were tough and they were real men. I remember every day after my paper auto saving my money for Speedway, I would stop at the liquor store, the Bottle and Smoke on Chapman Avenue in Orange, and I would pick up the cycle news and I would read that cycle news. And oftentimes I would see the name of Jim Fishbeck in the paper. I wasn't much into desert racing, but I would see the pictures, and oftentimes I would see Jim Fishbeck racing in the desert. He was a champion. He did really well, and he had a teammate named Larry Rossler. Larry Rossler was a legendary desert racer too, but both were champions. One day while I was watching the Speedway races at the Costa Mesa Speedway, there was a new rider in the Speedway. His name was Jim Fishbeck. And I was like, that's the same guy that I used to read about in Cycle News, the desert champion. And they asked Jim Fishbeck, why did you change from desert riding to Speedway? And he answered, well, when I crashed, there was only tortoises and snakes to watch me in the desert. But when I ride at Costa Mesa, there's 6,500 people watching me crash. Jim was tired of that lonely desert racing all by yourself with the sand and the dust. He liked the action of Costa Mesa Speedway, where they had the fans, the noise, the smell of the oil, the castor oil, and all the excitement. Larry Huffman. I was watching Jim his first year, his rookie year, and I believe he was Rookie of the Year that year. And his first year, he was such a good rider, he made the United States Speedway National Championship. The Nationals that year was at the Los Angeles Coliseum, and this was Jim's first national championship. He was not a threat to win the championship, but he was an exciting rider to watch. And in this one race, he went ahead and he locked handlebars with this one rider. He rode a little wild, a little bit on the outside, and he went off course and he thrown into the wall right at me. I happened to be about 5 rows up from where that bike of Jim Fishbeck was coming. And it was coming really fast in the blink of an eye. And suddenly Jim Fishbeck hit that wall full speed, and then he flew over about 3 or 4 rows up and he landed on this little old lady. And I looked down, I was 1 row above the accident. I was like, OMG! The lady was like 75 or 80 years old. She was an old lady. And Jim Fishbeck was laying in her lap. He had just crashed right into her lap really hard. And she was screaming. And Jim Fishbeck was looking at the lady. He was about that far from the lady's face. And he says, sorry, lady. And she was screaming. That was totally a mind-blowing and traumatic experience for me. I was sitting 1 row above the accident and I was watching the whole thing completely in perfect view. And I was just like blown away about the whole thing. And I said to myself, I was a rookie rider at that year. I was a D3 rider moving up, and I said to myself, I hope I never get to race Jim Fishbeck. That off season, I worked really hard on my Speedway. I practiced every weekend at Lake Elsinore, and I got pretty good. Started off the following season in D2, moved up quickly to D1, and I was racing against the big boys. I had some luck there in D1, won several main events at the low yardage and D1 handicap main events. One day I was at Costa Mesa and I was looking around. I was blown away with all these good riders. They were all the riders in the national championship in the year before, and I was racing against them. And I was like looking around, and these guys were all like superstars. And then I looked behind me, and then I saw, guess who? Jim, the animal Fishbeck. And he was looking right at me. And I was like, OMG, it's that guy, it's that crazy guy. And he looked at me and he snarled. It kind of freaked me out. I was just a young kid, a 17-year-old junior at Almadena High School. And this guy was a grown-up man, and he was like an animal. He wasn't even human. And he was in my race. My wish did not come true of not racing him. I raced him the very next year. And I was like, oh, geez. I was a little nervous. And I said to myself, Brian, this guy's scary. He's like deranged. So I have to ride fast so this guy doesn't catch me, because I know if he catches me, he's going to put me in the wall. So I decided at that time, I better go fast. I was so scared that race. I gave it everything I had. And I realized at that time that the best way that I ride is a little bit fearful. So I learned in life and in my racing, be nervous and be fearful and give it all you got. You see, back in that day, riders were making a lot of money. That was back in the glory days of the Speedway. And the riders were not that friendly back in that day. Why? Because they were making a lot of money and they did not want you to take that money away from them. So the riders were a little rough. Bruh. 2006, I was at the Industry Hills Speedway racing, and I was waiting in the sign-up booth. I was hanging out there and I looked behind me, and there was Jim Animal Fishbeck's son, little animal Jimmy Fishbeck. And he was right behind me, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And I got to meet his son, super cool guy, shook his hands. I said, I used to race with your papa. And he was just a cool dude. We became good friends, and Jimmy Fishbeck was a great rider too. Jim the Animal Fishbeck was a great father. He supported his son all the time, and I would see him at the races also. And one night, Jim Animal Fishbeck, he looked at me and he snarled, gave me that snarl. And I said, come on, dude, I'm a little older now. That did not work. I'm sure I was not Jim the Animal Fishbeck's favorite rider, favorite guy, but it doesn't matter. Who cares? I respect, and these riders of the old days are really good, and they have my respect. Last year, Jim the Animal Fishbeck and I became friends on Facebook. I have not talked with Jim yet, but I know he's a really cool guy. Going back to 2007, Jim snarled at me a few more times, and I said, Jim, hold on, don't give me that. I'm a tough guy too, and if you want, we can take it on the track, because I like riding and racing people. And I said, Jim, we can schedule a match race at the Industry Hills, a 2-lap, 4-lap, 20-lapper, doesn't matter. And I will take you on, dude. It was a grudge race that never happened, and I wanted to do that. And if I go back to America, maybe Jim Fishbeck can race me then. But seriously, it's all fun and games. We're having a good time. Speedway riders are crazy a little bit. They have a little bit of a screw loose. Anybody that rides 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, no brakes, alcohol burning monster beast motorcycle, these guys are a little bit crazy. Jim Fishbeck was one of a kind. He was a big dude. He was heavy. He was crazy guy. He was deranged. And Jim was just a good rider. He would ride that outside cushion along the wall. He would berm up against the wall. He would shoot up and he would ride the pole in a wheelie going down the straight. Everybody loved that. It was so cool. Jim Fishbeck would just rocket into the lead from way outside, hitting the wall. Wah! Jim Fishbeck was an amazing rider, and we really respect his talent. Jim Fishbeck did a great job.
Game over.
And when he landed on that lady's leg at the national championship, his first national championship, and he turned to that lady and said, sorry, lady. I realized that Jim Fishbeck was a rough and tumble guy. Number 275. He kept that 3-digit number his entire Speedway career. He raced 10 seasons about. And he was just a good rider. He was a solid, steady rider, and he rode all the Speedway tracks. Jim, the animal Fishback, he was just a gnarly dude, and he was a good rider too. And we just want to thank Jim Fishbeck, the big Jim Fishbeck. There will never be a guy like him in the modern era, I can promise you that. And we want to thank Jim for his years of dedication, his great riding, his thrills of riding that wall and freaking everybody out. He was a good rider, and we want to thank who? Number 275, Jim the Animal Fishback.